Hello everybody, and welcome to another video. I wanted to do another build video because I've been working on a new one for quite a while. I didn't work on this alone, to tell you the truth. I worked on it with a guildie who also does pretty good Elementalist stuff, so you can probably find a link in the description, if I remember, to his channel. He's World of Enders, and yeah, we've kind of been working on this new kind of concept for an Ellie build, and it kind of just evolved, I suppose, as time went by. That's essentially turned into a quite distinct... What I was really aiming for with this build was for it to be very distinct to the previous one that I did. So before, I was showing you guys some dual daggers stuff, and I've not necessarily stopped using that. I don't think that what I'm now using is going to replace that entirely, but I desperately wanted to have a build that really used scepter. So... I had a good look at some of the stuff you can do, and I was wondering about the scepter's strength. Honestly, scepter, compared to main hand dagger, there's a lot of discussion to do with it, but for me, it simply boils down to one of them has higher spike potential, and the other one allows you to get around faster, really. They're not necessarily comparable assets to either, and they've both got different drawbacks and benefits, but for me, that's really what I wonder about when I'm choosing which of these I want to go for to. So basically, I've decided, well, I want to play to the scepter's strength. And there's a very interesting thing you can do with the water magic trait line that allows you to spike pretty well, actually. The Elementalist as well, to me, I personally don't really feel like they're the class to use if you want to get lots of burst damage out. I think this is probably as good as you're going to get if you want to play as a burst damage Elementalist. And it goes something like this, as long as I don't mess it up, because it's actually quite difficult to pull off. There you go. It goes something like that. And it's pretty renewable. You can do it every time arcane power comes up, which is every 36 seconds if you trait it that way. There are honestly so many possibilities with how you can trait this. We spent so long talking about it. My recommendation, though, it would be if you want to try this out, follow what I'm about to say in this video and use this build for a little while, and then just tweak it to what you prefer, because there are some things that Elementalists get for traits that I consider to be essentials, and I'm actually playing without one of those essentials. One of those essentials to me, for example, right now, is in Arcane. I just love... Whereas it's trait 5, Elemental Attunement, I absolutely love that, and I'm playing without that right now to reduce the cooldown on these two arcane abilities, which are essential for our spike and would allow us to spike more frequently. So this is kind of the idea. It's a scepter main hand, dagger off hand build, and it's very much jump in, spike the crap out of something, and then it's not the same as a backstab thief, I wouldn't say. I don't know whether I get more damage out than a backstab thief. A lot of people don't really enjoy doing those, I believe, because the cooldown's quite high on those, where the cooldown for this is relatively short, and you can still swap into fire attunement after this particular spike that we've kind of got going on here with the Elementalist, that would then allow you to continue fighting until your other attunements have recharged and so forth. The idea of this as well, even though I kind of want it to feel very distinct, I don't want this to be something that is diluted in all ways just because I feel like I need more defense, more of this, more of this. I just want it to be something reasonably distinct that can get me through PvE. So don't look at this as a PvP build. Certainly, I mean, maybe you could try it in SPVP. I certainly haven't. I think a lot of it comes down to the gear, though. I'm not actually sure how high your critical chance can go in SPVP, but this relies on rather high critical chance. So with all of that said, with kind of what I wanted this build to be, let's have a look if you kind of like the idea of spiking people out quite quickly. This is how I've been playing with scepter, main hand, dagger, offhand. First of all, the weapons themselves. I only have a major sigil on here. Okay, this is the only thing that's not optimum. I should have probably bought one before I started filming this. Get yourself a superior sigil of air. That's very nice because you're going to be criticaling a lot. Basically, the idea here is we're building our gear pretty much entirely around critical damage and not critical chance. Only one thing that I've got on my gear at the moment gives me precision directly, and that's this chest piece, which is giving me 72 precision, which equates to about 4% critical chance. As you can see, my critical chance is incredibly low right now. It's only 18%. The idea is we get the criticals when we want them through arcane power, which raises that to 100% for the next 5 attacks. Now, you do have a trait under Arcana, again, which would allow you to get another version of arcane power when you reach 75% health. This obviously can't be triggered manually. I prefer it on the utility bar. Also, the one that will automatically, you'll get through Arcane Retribution trait when you reach 75% health, that version of arcane power. That actually is kind of quirky. It lasts for about 5 seconds, but all attacks you do in those 5 seconds can always critical, so it's slightly different to the arcane power you trigger on the utility bar, but you can use that too. Now, the highest you can get your critical damage to can be around 120-ish, I believe, is the nicest, with food as well, maybe up to 130. My build in particular here, the setup that I feel quite comfortable with, is a critical damage of 90. If you don't know what these numbers mean, critical chance is just while you're fighting, what chance do you have to actually critical someone, so you'll do more damage. Criticals themselves, if you have 0 critical damage, so right now we've got 90, but let's assume we've got 0, that would mean when we do a critical hit, we do 150% of the damage that the attack would usually have done, right? So you do a bit more. But then, as you build this critical damage number, that adds more percentage onto it. So we have a base of 150, but now that we have critical damage of 90 on here too, that means in total, when I do a critical hit, I do 240% of the damage that the skill would usually do. And as you build that higher and higher, so there's actually a decision you kind of make in Guild Wars 2, whether you want to go critical chance, so you're criticaling really, really frequently, or building the damage up. You can't really go for both. You could if you went for entirely Berserker's armor, but that also leaves you very vulnerable. You don't have any real defense there. I've gone for Valkyrie's armor and jewelry as much as I possibly can, which will give me power, vitality, and critical damage. Now, the other option, of course, is then, as I say, Berserkers, which will give you the power and critical damage, but instead of vitality, it gives you precision, which, as you can see, I've got right here. I've gone with the vitality, though. I like to have at least some defense in there, which is why I have 18,000 health. That could be 19,000 health if I had the chest piece as well, being Valkyrie's too, but I've decided to swap that out. So that's kind of in general what I've gone for. While we're in fights, we'll have Fury because of an arcane trait that gives us Fury when we swap, which actually means that our critical chance is just under 40% during fights for as long as the Fury's up. It does tick off, honestly, but it's reasonable enough for me to feel like I'm criticaling enough to really get the usage of this critical damage out. But the general idea is it's all in the engage here, really. And there's something kind of complicated we're doing with the traits here to actually get this burst. As I say, I don't really think Elementalists have much burst. If you look at Churning Earth, this is the skill we're doing most of the damage with up front. It only has a base damage of 2,601 on this particular build. I'm not actually sure what has the highest base damage out of all skills in the game. I think this is probably up there because it's got a massive channel before you can do it. But I can't confirm whether that's true or not, whether this is the highest or not. But still, it really shouldn't be that much. But we're actually bumping this damage, this 2,601, up to about 11,000. And as you, from some very simple maths, you can see that 11,000 isn't 240% more than 2,601. So there's some other little things. If you notice, to do the spike, we're going to start Churning Earth and we're going to go into water. Then we're going to teleport in, we're going to use arcane skills and swap into lightning. So the whole spike uses these 3 achievements. The best way to explain how it works, I guess, would be to go into my traits and just talk you through them. So first of all, we've got 10 in fire magic. And I've got cantrips grant you 3 stacks of might when used. Not necessary whatsoever. I only have 1 cantrip on my bar, to be honest, at this point. You can easily swap that into deal 5% extra damage to burning foes, perhaps. Another variant that you could go with on this is if you go all the way up into 25 for fire magic, you can then have 10% more damage to burning foes and cantrips deal more damage, and then you can go with cleansing fire instead of arcane wave, and you'll get some more damage out of there, and you will have also invested into fire magic, which therefore will have given you more power in the first place. However, one thing I would say straight away is you can go over the top trying to build a big build with lots of spike damage and think, oh yeah, we'll just go max out air, which will give us loads of critical damage, and max out fire, which will give us loads of just base power. But these things taper off. In particular, power tapers off very, very quickly. So you want to be careful. So this guy's engaged us as well. Another way that you can spike people too with this build would be like so, which should do a fair bit of damage, yeah, like that, which is just through fire, but it doesn't kill them entirely. So I would just recommend, don't worry too much about power. Power, you get diminishing returns. However, if you build critical damage, that's just a percentage increase, and it doesn't necessarily taper off. So I've only gone 10 into fire. Cantrips grant 3 stacks of might. There's not too much great here early on. You might think, well, why not go deal 10% more damage while attuned to fire? And that is reasonable, but there's a good reason why I haven't done that, which I'll explain later. So now we've gone into air magic as well, which is great for the precision, gives us more chance to critical, but more importantly, 20% more critical damage. You can max this out, but the last trait that you've got there isn't necessarily very useful. That last trait, actually, hold on, let me deal with this. You get 2 options there. You get when you're immobilized, when you've got some kind of CC, you'll give yourself a shocking aura, which really isn't that fantastic. Or you can get something called grounded, which will mean you do 20% more damage to knock down foes. The problem is, or stunned foes, the problem is with this spike, that might sound really nice, but with this spike, you can't really have someone knocked down for all of the damage to hit. So I haven't gone that far into it, though the extra 10% critical damage is quite nice. Because as I say, this is the important one if you want to be getting a lot of damage out in a short space of time. The traits that I've chosen, though, are 20% more damage to foes with less than 25% health. If you were in World versus World, which is what I kind of see this build as being reasonably useful for, or if you were in SPVP, I wouldn't go for this. It's not too useful. But for PvE, particularly against very large bosses that have got big health pools, this is kind of great. This is very nice to just keep smacking away at someone. You'll get lots of big numbers on those last little whiles. Other than that, though, because we're not on main hand dagger, Zephyr's boon isn't great. I honestly I'm not too impressed with many of these in this first lot, to be honest. The healing, you don't get very much healing out of it. You could go one with air. Scepter is a little bit slower, and that would be quite useful. I have thought about that, but that's not going to help you in fight, so I generally feel like that's not necessarily worth it. The second trait we've gone for, though, is quite important. Don't forget about this minor. This is very important. This is a part of our spike. When we attune to air, we strike our foe with a bolt of lightning. That's very important, and that will help a lot, because when that does critical damage, that's pretty nice. But this one here, this is quite important. Arcane Lightning. Gain 3% more critical hit damage for 10 seconds when you use an arcane skill. Of course, we're using 2 arcane skills here. This means that we're getting an extra 6% critical damage in fights, which bumps us up to 96% over here instead of just the 90 that you're seeing visible. And of course, if you eat some food too, then that could go up to 106. As I say, you can keep bumping it up and up and up, but don't get too blindsided by that. You do need the essentials in the build as well. So going back to the traits, if I can find the keyboard. I hate the way I record because I can never see the keyboard, so I just have to fumble around in the dark. Oh no, and I'm being attacked. Right, so back to the traits. No, not there. I keep going to the achievements. I don't know why. Now I've gone 10 into Earth. This isn't necessarily something you have to do, but I felt a little bit squishy with the build, so I wanted to round it out slightly. This is great for your defense, of course. Bit of condition damage as well. Our spike leaves people with 8 stacks of bleeding on them, and this will certainly help you finish off anyone who does miraculously survive. Obviously, you get a bit of toughness on the minor, but I've also got 5% more damage when you're in melee range. As you've noticed, the spike, we're right next to someone, so that helps with the spike there. Water magic. This is the most important, so I'll come back to this in a second. Lastly, I've got Arcana. This, of course, arcane skills recharge 20% faster. I love elemental attunement. It's really nice. You could go 20 in theory. This is kind of free, kind of open. As you can see, though, like the last build that I showed, I've kind of gone a bit all over the board. I'm a bit into each line, but we have got dramatic results out of it, just like I talked about before. We had dramatic results because we were juggling boons so much. Now, despite the fact we're still kind of split many ways in the traits, we still are getting dramatic results here too. So again, never feel like you have to go into Grandmaster, because you can get some great stuff without doing so. Right, now water, this is where the magic happens. This is where it might surprise you and might see how we're actually achieving this. So, first of all, we've got 20 points in. We're going to be regenerating health. It's got nothing to do with the spike. First of all, Arcane and Signet skills cause vulnerability when activated. So, Arcane Wave will give them vulnerability. I believe it's about 4 stacks that it gives, which means that we're doing 4% more damage. Don't forget about that. And Arcane Power also does. Now, you might have tried playing with this before. You might have had an enemy targeted, and now you're going to go over to them and you're going to activate Arcane Power, and you're going to look at them and see, oh no, there's no vulnerability. That's because it does work. It applies the vulnerability when you hit them. So you see there, now he's got 2 stacks of vulnerability because I cast 2 skills there, and we killed him in 2 hits. So that's how that's working. Arcane Power does still benefit from the trait, but it's only when you hit people. So because Arcane Power is your next 5 attacks do critical damage, this means this will inflict 5 stacks of vulnerability should you get the full usage out of the Arcane Power. And why is it described as a glyph in your aura effect? That's kind of interesting. So you're going to have that, right? And again, fumbling around trying to find it. There we go. We got it a bit quicker this time. So that's the first one. Arcane and Signet skills cause vulnerability. So together, these things are given about 10 stacks of vulnerability at the moment of the spike. Just as all our damage hits, they're going to have about that much on them. Further, past that, we've got this other very important one. While attuned to water, your spells deal 20% more damage to vulnerable foes. But here's the thing, when we spike someone with Churning Earth, we're not in water, we're in Earth, right? Well, that's the trick to the whole build. You get a lot of synergy within yourself because you activate Churning Earth and go straight into water. We're still channeling Churning Earth while we're in that attunement. So we're getting the 20% damage despite the fact we're using an Earth skill. And here's the really nice bit of it. You hit someone with the Churning Earth with Arcane Power active. So first of all, it's going to do loads of damage because you've just scored a critical hit with Churning Earth. But it's also going to apply vulnerability, and it applies the vulnerability before the damage. So that, therefore, is going to enable us to, if we've swapped into water, get a massive 20% boost because we're hitting an enemy that has got vulnerability on them. So we're getting a huge critical hit that's boosted by 20% plus an extra 6% on the critical damage, and an even further because of all the vulnerability we've just inflicted, all at that same second. That's how you get the huge amount of damage. The trick is rolling into water while you're still using Churning Earth. Now, there are various other ways to boost this and different directions you can go in, particularly when it comes to gear. So, for example, if we have a look at my gear, I'm using Runes of the Scholar. Runes of the Scholar. These are giving me 10% more damage while my health is above 90%. Obviously, there's a drawback here. If you're doing this in the middle of a fight, then you're going to go below 90% health, and then you're going to lose spike damage. As I say, this is mostly about the engage for me. You do have other options. You can go for Runes of the Divinity, which also seriously boost your critical damage, as well as all other stats, but they're incredibly expensive if you're doing this on a PvE character, so I'd warn you of that. Also, the Runes of the Scholar are very nice for this build in this spike, but they're also reasonably expensive too. Not as expensive as the Runes of Divinity, but do be aware of that. Now, the other option for you is Runes of Rage. These will boost your critical damage even more, and they'll mean that while you're under the effects of Fury, you also have further critical damage, an extra 5%. So the net result is about the same. However, with this build, if you watch, our Fury ticks off quite quickly. I'm not saying that Runes of Rage are completely useless. I think they are quite useful, and they're, especially for price, they're pretty useful. But if you watch, we swap into water straight away, and by the time the spike begins, what's happened? Our Furies ran out. That was a pretty good one. Our Furies already ran out, so you're not going to be getting the benefit of that unless you wait until the last second to swap into Water Attunement. But then the problem with waiting for the last second to get into Water Attunement is the spike ends by us going into Air Attunement. Now, if you've only just gone into Water, the Air is still going to be on cooldown. ArenaNet have implemented a 1 second cooldown, global cooldown, on all your attunements when you swap. So watchers are going to Fire, they all go on recharge for that 1 second. That's to stop people basically doing what we're trying to do here, just rolling through all of the different attunements to get lots of instant spike damage off. So you have to go into Water Attunement early. Like, I'll show you what happens if we go into Water Attunement at the very last moment. So we're going to start charging up. We may as well Lightning Flash in, then we're going to go into Water Attunement, and now we can't go into Lightning to finish him off for a little while. So it becomes a spike that occurs in 2 different blasts. So that's my main problem with that. You can, of course, then trait even further into Arcana to fix that. You could go 15 and then get your attunement bonuses for longer, and then the Fury will last. But I tend to like the Runes of the Scholar. I'm kind of uploading all at the front for a big spike at the start. Now, what happens if somebody survives? I hear you wonder. This is kind of interesting, but it's a really long cooldown. It's not that great, it's not that viable for most fights. Well, I'll demonstrate that to you by doing one of these spikes, but without Arcane Power on. So it all relies on Arcane Power. Without Arcane Power or Arcane Wave, I won't use that either. We're not getting any of the vulnerability, we're not criticaling hitting, and we're just going to get the base damage pretty much, which isn't that high because I've not really been building much base damage. And you'll see how significantly lower the spike is just because I'm not using an arcane skill. Right, unless I get lucky and it crits with the Churning Earth anyway because I've got the 18%. But we'll go like this. We'll even go into Water Attunement, though it won't matter. Look at how little damage he took. Now we'll go into Lightning. Look at how little damage he's taken. You're doing significantly more if you actually manage to use the arcane power. So it all kind of revolves around this. Now that might look bad to you. That might look, oh shit, well look, there's really not much we can do here. It's a bit similar to playing a Backstab Thief in that it feels like it's got a long cooldown. But here's the nice thing. This is one big spike that combos out of 3 attunements, which I quite like, by the way. But after that, you've still got fire available to you. Now, this is where one of those lightning traits comes in handy that I talked about earlier. Let's just engage this guy. Let's do another bad spike and pretend that this guy has just survived against us. Maybe he even interrupts us. So we've done that, and now he's here. We've just activated our lightning attunement stuff. What do? Well, you can then immediately ride the lightning into him and updraft them. Now they're knocked over, and you can roll into fire attunement, hit them with a phoenix, a dragon's tooth, and your main fire spike. When you click this video and you might have thought, oh, a big spike on an Elementalist with scepter, you might have thought, oh, well, it's the fire spike. That's still extremely powerful. And going back to what I talked about earlier, in lightning, if you were to go with a grounded trait, you can't hit someone with a dragon's tooth after an updraft. It takes too long to land. But you can hit them with a phoenix, and you can hit them with a fire grab. So if you've got them in fire by doing the cleansing flames thing that I talked about earlier, if you do all of that together, you'll get a massive secondary spike afterwards on anyone that survived and can do nothing about it because they're on the floor. Now, obviously, if you're doing this against players and world versus world, again, I'm not so sure how viable it'd ever really be in SPVP. I'm not even sure you can build your critical damage that high. If you're doing it in world versus world, It's all about getting the right moment. Make sure people don't know that you're there and you manage to pop in at the right time. It's particularly nice against large zergs because this is an 11,000 damage spike AoE, plus all of the bleeding that's on there too. But of course, Churning Earth is easily dodged, okay? You don't have to dodge out of its range, never forget this. Just dodge if you see someone with Churning Earth, because all you have to do is dodge at the moment that it blasts and you'll be absolutely fine. So it can be pretty seriously hindered if people know where you're coming. It's all about getting the drop on there just nice. For general PvE, I mean, enemies are mostly static. They just stand around. It's very easy to spike them out. For the record, I don't think there's a single enemy, unless they're a veteran or a champion, in the entire game that this can't just spike out in one hit. There might be something. I haven't obviously combed Tyria entirely, but there's very little that will actually survive something like this. So yeah, this is kind of the build. There's a lot that you can play with here. The only other thing maybe I haven't fully explained is why we're going into lightning. Don't forget, we've got this minor trait in lightning. Why do I keep going to achievements? We've got this minor trait in lightning, which means that when we go straight into it, we'll be getting 1 bolt of lightning down, which will critical hit because of arcane power, which will do a lot of damage. And then we also have lightning strike, which is instant activation, and you can blind them. That doesn't actually do any damage, but a ride the lightning 2 can be done pretty much in the same moment. So you're going to go several hits of lightning, bang, 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 straight on their heads afterwards, after the main spike. So you're getting about 11,000 from the main big Churning Earth, then you're getting about 3 to 4,000 from Arcane Wave, and then a further 3 to 4,000 from rolling into Lightning Achievement. If they're still alive, you updraft them, you go into fire, and then you hit them with the big guns that were here. Which, as I say, are actually pretty reasonable anyway. I mean, I can just use 2 skills there, and I'll probably do a fair bit of damage, so you can still nuke people out just like that. So it's not a one-trick pony by any means, but it certainly will do a lot of damage. The fire's nuke, obviously, if they survive the fire nuke, if they dodge at the right moment, a lot of people know to expect that. They see that coming, then of course they're going to get away pretty easy. But with the Churning Earth one, they're coming out blinded, they're coming out seriously bleeding, and they're just generally not going to have a good time trying to recover from something like that. One other thing, the timing for this is, the reason why I find this build to be quite fun is I wanted it to feel quite distinct from what I was previously using, juggling all the boons on dual daggers. Now, the one thing that makes this kind of difficult is arcane power is bugged. It's not necessarily bugged or as much as it's an oversight from ArenaNet, but it comes down to how skills work in the game. So Churning Earth, as we activate, as we channel it, it's going to be pulsing continuously around us, even if there's no enemy there, crippling things in the area. These count as attacks that will waste arcane power. So if I start going Churning, if I activate Churning Earth early, you may have been wondering why don't I do that early if you've noticed, why am I waiting for the last second? Well, if I go Arcane Power and now Churning Earth, and now I try and teleport in next to an enemy, watch Arcane Power in my bar. Arcane Power's gone. I haven't attacked 5 times. I've only done 1 skill. Why? Well, I've done 2 skills, including the Lightning Flash, but why has it ran out straight away? And it's because Churning Earth will consume all of Arcane Power on its own. And that's a serious problem. So you have to trigger Arcane Power right at the end. So your combo is going to be Churning Earth in, then straight away go into Water Achievement so that your Lightning Achievement's on cooldown for when you need it. Lightning Flash next to someone, Arcane Wave, then Arcane Power. Use Arcane Wave first because this will automatically critical hit, so there's no point using it after Arcane Power because that would just waste one of your attacks. So Arcane Wave, then Arcane Power, and they'll go trigger in about the same second. If you watch my skill bar as I do it, they go straight away. Then as soon as you've done that, that will be just before Churning Earth hits. As soon as Churning Earth hits, then you roll into Air Attunement. If you get the timing slightly wrong, if you go into Air Attunement too quickly, you're going to lose the benefit of the Water Attunement trait. If you use Arcane Power too late, then Churning Earth isn't going to crit in the first place, and it's going to be significantly less damage. If you use Arcane Wave after Arcane Power, then you're going to be losing effectiveness from the Arcane Power when you're spiking them at the end with Lightning Achievement. So it's all very, very specific, and it's kind of fiddly. You need to use a lot of buttons very quickly, but it's one sweeping motion, and once you get used to it, you can spike people out, and that's what I really like about it. It's not just building this thing properly, it's actually learning how to use the skills in a really interesting way, because it's quite a difficult spike to pull off effectively. Especially, I mean, it's one thing to do it like I am against static enemies that are just stood around in a field, but if you're then looking at doing this in World versus World, for example, against someone that's running around, or in SPVP, then suddenly it's going to be a lot harder to land it right, to know, okay, he's dodged twice, he can't do it again, and be able to actually specifically do it. This whole idea of lightning flashing in Churning Earth, I've talked about before. That might even be new to some people. So the idea of doing that and swapping into Water Attunement and all this other stuff all at the same time might be quite a lot to handle, but it certainly is a very effective combo. Churning Earth's a funny skill to me because I feel like it's the most useless ability if you don't have Lightning Flash. But if you do have Lightning Flash, and particularly if you build everything around a big spike like this, then it's probably one of the most fun things to do in the game. So again, if you watch very closely, I'm just going to do what I said. We're going to go into water. We're going to flash next to him. And then we're going to do it like so. And as you can see, I activated both those skills at the same moment. And they just nuke out in the first second. You can obviously flash next to someone early, but then you don't. It just doesn't all spike in all at the same time. Don't forget, lightning flash itself is doing damage. Now, that might look really mediocre. 580 damage, that's absolutely shit. But when you actually use this with arcane power, 250% more of that is not bad, actually. When you're guaranteed to be able to crit from it, you know that you're going to be getting vulnerability. The vulnerability applies early, so you're boosting it even further. It really does all pay off. So that's my trait setup. This is what I'm generally happy with, for it to both feel kind of unique, a bit of a bombing build, but at the same time, it's actually viable in other areas. This doesn't have as much defense as the previous build I showed off, but so you'll have to bear that in mind. It's not a perfect build, as I say. I don't see this replacing or better or worse than my other one. It's just a different way to play the game, which I really quite like. Last thing that I kind of want to cover is, you might be wondering, why not go dual daggers? I've been talking about this being a scepter build. Why not just get my dual daggers back out? As you can see, I've been playing with it. Why not do it? Well, it comes down to the same bug, because in theory, fire, you could still be getting a nuke like this. You could dive in with burning speed with arcane power on, so you get guaranteed to crit with burning speed, which itself does have reasonable base damage, and then roll into water during the skill, which you can do. Watch. So you activate it and you're in water before it finally hits. You can do it with many different skills. Dragon's Tooth, Phoenix, you can do it with all of those different things on the Scepter too. So I was playing with this. I was like, well, why do we have to do this on Scepter? Well, again, it comes down to the same bug that Churning Earth has when used with arcane power. The way that burning speed works is it's supposed to hit enemies as you fly past them. So the way that the devs have coded it is, as you move forward, it pulses lots of hits of damage as you go forward, and those all waste arcane power incredibly quickly. So fast, in fact, that if I activate arcane power and use burning speed, it's gone. It's gone just with the one ability. And when so much of your engage is reliant on that, and that means that you don't get the effectiveness of it from anything else, it's a wasted concept, basically. So yeah, that's the idea, guys. The most fun one that I would want to play with. I've been spending mostly, honestly, of my time with this in PvE. I would very much like to get grounded working with it. Grounded is such a cool trait. If you could actually get someone knocked down under less than 25% health, and you roll into them with this after you've just eaten a steak dinner that gives you plus 250 power on top of an extra 10% critical damage, I think you could probably hit about 20k. The highest I've seen so far is 15k, but that wasn't with everything procced in the right situation. Obviously, though, it's getting very situational. That's not really a build so much as it is how much damage can we do possible, which gets very confusing. I mean, one thing to remember is you might then look at that and say, oh, I could play with a friend and he could knock the enemy down. But then you're talking about group tactics, and then you're talking about what an entire group or teams of people can actually be able to achieve, which is outside the scope of just a regular solo build, I feel like. I mean, one thing I've been playing with, I'd love to actually get footage of at some point, is find whatever is the highest base damage, boost it up 25 stacks of might, then do it on a critter in a level 80 area with warriors that have just used on my mark on it, so it's got 25 stacks of vulnerability, just to see what the highest damage you could possibly get would be. I think that'd be quite fun, but as I say, it's out of the scope of what we're doing here. Oh yeah, one more thing as well, lastly. I know I keep going on, but there's all sorts of stuff to talk about here. The last thing too is, if we re-equip our scepter here, you can also get a slightly higher spike too by giving yourself might before going in. That would be, as I say, this is a 3 attunement combo really, but if you've got the foresight, if you've got the time, let's say we want to spike out this Risen Drake, what we can do is, I want to get a clean engage though. What we can do is, let's go for this Drake so no one else attacks us, is actually give ourselves might through our fire field first. Can you please go away? See, this is the thing with all, it's like, I don't know, I actually quite like how many enemies there are. What you can do is lay down your fire field in fire and actually jump in it through earth before going with your Churning Earth, which will give you about 9 stacks of might before the spike too. But as I say, a might is really, all it's doing is giving you power, and power offers diminishing returns. So here, the trick to this though is you need to use Dragon's Tooth. This is another blast, and this blasts at the moment you cast it rather than at the moment it lands. So what you want to do is cast Dragon's Tooth, but not on the enemy if you want it to be a clean spike. So you're going to have to make sure you're not targeting the enemy first, then lay down your fire field, then throw it down, then swap into earth, then jump in it, then do the Churning Earth, then swap into water, then begin your spike. My lightning attunement is still on recharge, and yeah, I could have done it anyway to this guy, but I forgot. So yeah, and then you've used all 4 attunements, but to me that's not worth it, because you're now waiting for your fire to come back if they haven't died from it, and the effectiveness of those 9 stacks of mites is limited somewhat. So yeah, that's pretty much everything with the build. Hope you have fun. It's pretty cool, actually, because, as I say, I never really felt like Ellies could spike much. I'm sure you can spike a lot with other classes, but all in 1 second, I'm not sure. Obviously, Backstab Thief comes to mind. There are big bursts of damage that warriors can get frenzying with their greatswords, for example, but then they're reliant on their cooldown of Frenzy itself, which is about 60 seconds. Plus, that's lots of hits and not necessarily as fast as this. So, yeah, anyway, I hope that kind of opens your eyes to some more stuff you can do with the Elementalist. I wanted to put out another build video for quite a while. I know it's been a long one, but I hope you learned something, and let me know what you think and what maybe you've come up with too. As I said, there's a lot. When you start looking at the traits, there's a lot of stuff you could start playing with. We've probably considered it all, though, I feel like at this point. Thanks very much, guys, and I'll see you next time.